Some deaths make noise, others don't. The scariest ones vanish in the seams, between errands, between phone calls, between the blink and the breath. And when they're finally found, if they're found at all, the world has already moved on. This story is about 5 of them. Killers who didn't chase fame. They didn't want headlines, they wanted absence, silence sculpted into something permanent. And the first of them didn't begin with a murder. He began with a favor and a fence. Rural Tennessee, 2013. A town so small it didn't have a gas station, just one diner and a Dollar General. People there didn't lock their doors unless a storm was coming. And nobody thought twice when a quiet man named Owen Carr started doing little jobs around the neighborhood, fixing porches, clearing brush, offering to haul junk to the dump. He charged almost nothing. Usually just asked for a plate of food or a tool he could borrow. Polite, faint southern drawl. Nobody knew where he came from, but nobody asked. In towns like that, if you mind your own business, people leave you alone. And Owen counted on it. His first confirmed victim was 74-year-old Janet Powell, widow, lived alone. Owen had been fixing her gate, said it would only take a day. She made him sandwiches, thanked him, and 3 days later, she was gone. No sign of struggle, house untouched. Police chalked it up to confusion, maybe a fall in the woods. Volunteers searched, nothing. It wasn't until 6 months later when her neighbor disappeared too. Same setup, same age range, same Owen working on a shed. That suspicion began to bloom. By the time authorities realized what they were dealing with, 4 people were missing. All elderly, all lived within 5 square miles. All had hired Owen to help with something minor. When deputies went to question him, he was gone, left behind only a flattened trailer pad and a burned pile of what appeared to be fence posts. But forensics found something else buried under the ashes. Teeth. Human. Not from one person, from 3. A manhunt began, but it didn't last long. 3 towns over, Owen Carr was found sleeping in the back of a rusted pickup parked behind an abandoned motel. He didn't run, didn't speak, just handed over a folded piece of paper, a map dotted with X's coordinates. "They're all clean," he said. "I made sure." What investigators uncovered stunned even hardened agents. Owen had spent 2 years building a pattern, choosing only people who lived alone, with properties large enough for fire pits or burn barrels. He never forced entry, never used a weapon. He killed by suffocation, a homemade plastic bag rig, weighted with chains, used only once per victim. Fast, quiet, efficient. Then he'd burn the body piece by piece in a rotating pit, always after midnight. But it wasn't just the method that disturbed authorities, it was the notebooks. Inside Owen's truck were 6 weathered journals, each filled with diagrams, schedules, charts. Burn rate by weight, muscle V, bone decay, wet wood, best kinds of trees to mask smell. And on the inside cover of the last book, in shaky pencil, "If I keep everything clean, maybe I can stay." They learned later that Owen had spent much of his life in foster care, in and out of homes, abused, forgotten, expelled from multiple schools for excessive order-based aggression. He wasn't killing because of rage. He was killing to purify. Anyone who left trash in their yard, who let wood rot, who lived in mess, they were targets. He confessed to 7 murders. Forensic teams believe there were more. Some say double, some say more than 20. But the bodies are gone, vaporized in rural fire pits, scattered into creek beds, spread under fence posts like ash fertilizer. At his sentencing, Owen simply said, "I was fixing things." He's serving life in Riverbend Maximum Security Institution, alone, refuses all visitors, doesn't speak. But once a year, without fail, the prison receives a letter. No return address, no message, just a page torn from a gardening catalog, circle drawn around wood chip mulch. Owen Carr's mind wasn't fractured, it was categorized. That's what made him impossible to profile at first. There was no impulse, no obsession with violence, no pleasure in death. Just a strange, relentless pursuit of tidiness. Not in the Marie Kondo sense, but in the way a predator stalks infection, convinced it's performing surgery. He didn't see what he was doing as murder. He saw it as maintenance, a necessary sweep. And the people he killed, they weren't victims. They were, in his own words, obstacles to order. The journals confirmed this chilling logic. Each victim had a full-page profile, handwritten, underlined in red, with notes like, left lawn mower in rain, or sleeps past 9 a.m. every day, or garbage left on porch 3+ days. Owen wasn't driven by hatred. He was driven by aesthetic offense. Mess to him wasn't just visual, it was moral. Disorder made him physically uncomfortable, and the more he saw of it, the more he believed it had to be corrected. One case agent noted how eerily similar Owen's writing was to old janitorial logbooks. Neat columns, timestamps, initials, check marks. That's when the FBI dug deeper and found something strange. In 2009, Owen had worked for 6 months as a nighttime janitor at a private Christian high school in Kentucky. He was fired quietly, no police involved. The reason? A complaint from a teacher who caught Owen disinfecting her shoes in the locker room while she was still wearing them. She reported that he'd said, "These bring in sidewalk bacteria. If I clean them now, you'll be okay." That's who Owen Carr was. Not a killer seeking thrill, a correctionist, a man who saw filth not just on surfaces, but in lifestyles. He believed he was doing something merciful, preventing contamination. Each home he entered, he left cleaner than before, wiped surfaces, repaired broken things, burned everything that didn't fit into his version of clean living, including the people. And the fire wasn't just practical, it was ritual. He built his burn pits in geometric patterns, always dug to precise depth, always fed with specific combinations of softwood and bone. The forensic fire specialist brought onto the case later described it as cremation as math. Owen had calculated how long it would take to reduce human tissue to unrecognizable fragments, down to minutes and temperature variance. And in every pit they excavated, they found traces of the same 3 materials layered under the ash: cedar chips, coarse sand, and a single iron nail. Why the nail? No one knows. Owen never said. But every pit had it, placed deliberately in the center, like a signature. His van, impounded after his arrest, told an even darker story. It was spotless, bleached, insulated, walls lined with hooks and fold-down work surfaces. There was no blood, no prints, no hair, just a single sheet of wax paper taped to the dash. It read, "You cannot fix the world, but you can remove what shouldn't be in it." That quote wasn't his. It came from an obscure DIY homesteading blog, last updated in 2007, run by a survivalist family in Montana. The blog had 3 followers. One of them? A burner email traced back to Owen's public library card. When the media caught hold of the story, they dubbed him the Yard Man, a name that made neighbors laugh uneasily because that's how they remembered him. The guy with hedge trimmers, quiet, polite, always offered to take trash bags out. They hadn't realized the bags might have contained pieces of the people next door. But the fear he left behind wasn't flashy. It was slow, paranoid, lingering. People in his old neighborhood started hiring landscapers, not for beauty, for protection, to prove they cared about their property, to avoid becoming the type Owen would have chosen. And still, to this day, one of his former neighbors swears she saw someone standing by her burn barrel at night. Just standing, watching, making sure it was used correctly. The deeper terror was in how easy it was for him. Owen didn't need weapons, he didn't need force, just the illusion of help. Every victim let him in, offered him drinks, some even gave him a key. He never took money, never argued. He moved like a ghost with a tool belt, invisible until the heat of a midnight fire brought the truth out of the soil. And now, long after his trial ended, after the gates at Riverbend closed behind him, his legacy still simmers. A young agent on the case once said he didn't want to hurt anyone. He wanted the world to quiet down. And he made it quiet, permanently. Because Owen Carr didn't kill for pleasure. He killed for peace. And the scariest part, for a long time, it worked. Some killers strike with chaos, messy, loud, impossible to miss. Owen Carr wasn't one of them. He crept through rural towns like mold in drywall, cleaning as he destroyed, convinced he was helping. But not all predators believe in order. Some thrive in the exact opposite. Some don't hunt to correct, but to corrupt. Where Owen wanted cleanliness, the next killer fed on contamination, not just physical, but spiritual. And instead of fire, he used decay. The rot wasn't just his signature, it was his purpose. In the Midwest, he became a whispered story, a myth you told kids so they'd come home before dark. But the truth was worse, because the man they feared was real, and his name was Jonas Kell. Illinois, 2017. 3 counties bordering the Mississippi River had quietly recorded 11 missing persons over a 16-month stretch. All young men, all between 19 and 28, all transient, most with no stable housing. Police labeled them as drifters, runaways, junkies, not worth the manpower. But one case, a 21-year-old named Adam Elroy, finally cracked through. Adam had been clean, enrolled in a community college, working nights at a convenience store. He wasn't drifting, he had an apartment, he had a plan, and one morning, he vanished. The only trace? A jar left on his kitchen table, filled with pond water, a single human tooth floating inside. Nobody knew what to make of it, not until a second jar turned up 2 months later, this time in an abandoned barn 30 miles away with 2 teeth. Then a third, 3 teeth, always floating, always in jars sealed with wax. At first it seemed random. Then someone connected the pattern. Each jar was found 12 days after the person vanished, and each one had a label carved into the glass, a name burned in acid. Kell. It wasn't long before fear spread. Locals started calling him the Jar Man, but the truth was worse than folklore. Because Jonas Kell wasn't hiding, he was waiting. Investigators eventually caught him living in a gutted shipping container on the outskirts of a decommissioned industrial park. No electricity, no plumbing, just rot. Buckets of bones. Moldavian decay so thick that when the door was breached, the lead agent passed out from the stench. Inside were 7 corpses, suspended from hooks, in various stages of decomposition, not preserved. Cultivated. Kell wasn't killing for disposal. He was growing something. Tissue samples revealed he had been feeding the bodies, injecting them with homemade organic solutions. Egg whites, pond scum, crushed insects, rot accelerants. It was as if he was forcing them to decay faster, not out of neglect, but out of obsession. One body had been turned entirely inside out. Organs on the outside, bones cracked into spirals, no signs of trauma. All done post-mortem, methodically, ritualistically. In a notebook found near a decomposed head, Kell had written, "Only through rot does the truth emerge." He believed that decomposition was divine, that in the breakdown of form, the real was revealed. In his mind, flesh was a mask, and his job was to peel it off, one layer at a time. He wasn't insane in the classic sense. He wasn't hearing voices. He was worshiping entropy. He saw decay as holy, a sacred process that most of us waste by burying the dead in boxes, sealing them from air, from light, from time. He wanted to free them, and it wasn't random. Every victim shared one trait. They had once tried to get better. Former addicts, former inmates, people trying to reclaim their lives. Kell didn't choose the hopeless. He chose the hopeful. Because in his twisted theology, hope was a lie, a defiance of the natural state, ruin. He lured victims in with Craigslist job postings. Mobile cleanup needed. Disposal work. Warehouse clearing. The victims would show up to a fake address, find nothing, go to leave, and that's when he'd appear. calm, unarmed, inviting. He'd ask if they were willing to do a dirtier job for more pay. Most said no, but some said yes. They were never seen again. His rituals deepened over time. The final victim recovered, a 19-year-old named Levi, was found with his ribcage split into a blooming spiral, arms removed, jaw wired open with fishing line. His heart had been placed in a jar, floating, surrounded by moths. But the scariest part wasn't the state of the body. It was what had been left on the wall, a phrase, burned into rusted sheet metal. Everything beautiful comes from rot. Kell's trial lasted 6 days. He refused a lawyer, represented himself, spoke calmly, smiled often, and never once denied the murders. Instead, he lectured about mold, about transformation, about how decay reveals the soul like sunlight reveals bones in a field. When the judge sentenced him to life without parole, Kell simply said, "That's fine, I'm composting already." In prison, he's kept in solitary, not for violence, but for smell. Guards say his cell reeks despite daily cleanings. Inmates report flies gathering at the door. Medical checks show nothing, but something is growing, slowly, quietly. And when Kell was asked, in a psychiatric interview, if he felt remorse, he gave a single answer: "I'm not sorry, I'm fertilizer." They didn't know what to do with the bodies. Not at first. Even the forensic techs, veterans of hundreds of scenes, paused when they stepped into that rusted shipping container. The air clung to their lungs like glue, but it wasn't the stench that unmoored them. It was the intent. The way Jonas Kell hadn't just arranged the corpses but tended to them, like a gardener. 7 bodies, each in a different state of rot. Hung with surgical wire, positioned upright or curled, eyes propped open with broken twigs. Some had moss growing along their scalps. Others had flesh peeled back with precise blade work, layer by layer, like he was studying what died first. This wasn't madness. This was obsession dressed as theology. And Jonas Kell had rules. That was the most disturbing discovery. Not just rituals, but written rules. A binder, weather-warped and sticky, contained over 200 pages of meticulous notes, each labeled rights, followed by a number. Right 01, never interrupt a body mid-rot. Right 12, no tools made of plastic. Right 34, maggots are sacred. Let them decide. It wasn't gore for gore's sake. It was a perverse kind of faith system, one that believed the soul emerged not through life, but through return to filth. He wasn't preserving corpses. He was liberating them from the illusion of form. The teeth in jars, once dismissed as trophies, were actually his version of witnesses. According to his writings, a tooth remains after the scream, after the skin, after the shame. The pond water wasn't symbolic. It was chosen specifically for its bacteria, a microscopic funeral, a way to baptize the tooth in the same organisms that would eventually consume the rest of the flesh. When FBI behavioral profilers reviewed his notes, one agent had to step away mid-session. She later described Kell as not a killer, but a priest of putrefaction. That phrase would become infamous, quoted in books, documentaries, and eventually courtroom transcripts. But it still failed to capture the full dread of what Jonas Kell believed. Because Kell wasn't just trying to rot bodies, he was trying to speed up time. That's what became clear the more they studied his setup. He'd insulated the container not just to trap smell, but to increase humidity. He drilled holes in specific walls to direct airflow onto particular organs. He'd even imported composting materials from nurseries across 3 states. One envelope, still unopened, contained beetle larvae used in natural decomposition tanks. Kell hadn't just embraced death. He wanted to evolve it, accelerate it, understand what came after the flesh peeled off, what remained when the human image collapsed. And he left warnings. Not threats, warnings. Taped to each body was a slip of paper, handwritten with phrases like, "This is the face you refuse to look at." He tried to be clean. I helped him fail. Hope is a disease. I am the cure. But the most chilling message was pinned to the spine of a corpse in the far corner. What they came to believe was Kell's masterpiece. The note read, "This one still believed in mornings. Look at him now." They traced Kell's history back to a burned-down house in Beardstown. Childhood records were spotty, no birth certificate. He'd been listed in CPS records as Jonas Key until the age of 6, then disappeared. Resurfaced at 19, arrested for trespassing in a cemetery. He'd been caught sleeping next to a freshly dug grave, wrapped in a tarp, listening for changes. He was never violent, never charged with assault, always just on the edge. The man in the corner of a room, the shadow by the tree line, the guy you forget you saw, but he was studying, watching, waiting. And in 2016, he disappeared completely. No employment records, no fixed address. His entire digital presence vanished, and a year later, the jars began to appear. But his real legacy isn't legal, it's cultural. After his arrest, across Illinois and Missouri, sales of security cameras tripled. Farmers installed motion lights in fields. Facebook groups exploded with rumors about rotting smells near rivers, odd jars found in abandoned sheds. Entire podcasts were launched to dissect his notes. But even the experts agreed on one thing. Kell didn't want to be caught. He wanted to be replicated. That's why his notes were so detailed. He didn't want to be famous. He wanted to plant something, let it spread. And maybe he succeeded. Because 3 years after his incarceration, in a completely different state, a jar turned up. Not in Illinois, but in Georgia, a lake dock. Same wax seal, one tooth, no fingerprints. But the word Kell was etched into the wood nearby. Authorities ruled it a prank. But deep online forums whispered another theory. That Kell had disciples, that others read his rites and began their own decay worship. That rot, once a fear, had become a form of freedom, a way to escape the image, to leave nothing behind. When Kell was asked in prison if he'd heard about the Georgia jar, he smiled, closed his eyes, and said, "Everything beautiful spreads, even me. You can't bleach what isn't there." That was the lesson authorities learned too late with Jonas Kell. He didn't leave stains. He left spores, ideas that traveled, settled, and grew in the darkest minds. But what if the killer doesn't want to spread? What if the killer wants to erase? To not just remove life, but wipe away identity, history, presence, every trace that a person ever existed. The next predator didn't kill with belief or delusion. He killed with silence, with patience, and with digital fire. His name never made national news, because that's exactly how he planned it. Because for 10 years, he was the last person seen before dozens of people vanished from their own lives, not because they were taken, but because they were deleted. He called himself Morse, not his real name. That was never found. But it was the name he used in every burner email, every account, every virtual footprint. The FBI dubbed him the Ghost Digger after realizing what he truly did. Morse wasn't just a killer. He was a forensic executioner. Every person he eliminated, and yes, eliminated is the only word that fits, was first identified through an arcane pattern of online data mining. He didn't stalk you in person. He stalked your metadata. What made you real in the systems we depend on? Between 2010 and 2020, 26 individuals were discovered to have effectively vanished from public records, government systems, and social media, not all at once, but bit by bit. Their driver's licenses became invalid, their tax records failed to verify, their phones dropped service, their cloud storage dissolved. Relatives thought they were being ghosted, employers assumed they'd quit. But when local authorities followed up, they discovered something strange. Every one of them had interacted, however briefly, with a freelance IT specialist using the alias Morse. It started with mundane things, Craigslist ads offering digital cleanup, online clutter erasure, or full life optimization. He posed as a digital minimalist, a privacy consultant for people who wanted to vanish from the algorithm. And he was good. Too good. Victims thought they were hiring him to remove spam, fix their privacy settings, or delete old accounts. What he was really doing was mapping their entire lives. Where they lived, who they talked to, what cameras they passed, what schedules they kept, and crucially, what systems would forget them fastest. The first body wasn't found until 2015. A woman named Dana H., last seen in Nevada, was discovered 6 months later inside a storage unit registered to a non-existent company. Her teeth had been removed, fingerprints burned, tattoos sliced off. But none of that shocked police as much as what wasn't there: her name. The storage facility had no record of who rented the unit. The key code had been deleted from the log. Her vehicle had been scrubbed from DMV records. When they ran her face through databases, it didn't register. She was erased, not hidden, gone, like she never existed. This was Morse's art, not the kill, but the unmaking. He didn't just take lives, he took proof. One agent described it as the first murder I've ever seen that felt like watching someone get unpublished, and he left no trace because he knew where traces lived. When tech companies started tightening protocols, he adapted, began using dead zones, public Wi-Fi from thrift stores, reprogrammed routers inside empty homes. His kills became cleaner, faster. One by one, people disappeared, and nothing remained but static. Until 2019, when Morse made a single mistake. He chose the wrong target, a reclusive, off-the-grid prepper in Wyoming named Conrad Webb. Conrad had no online footprint, but he had land, and dogs, and cameras that weren't connected to any cloud. Just VHS tapes, manually labeled, stored in a shed. One of those tapes showed Morse, thin, early 40s, black baseball cap, clear gloves, entering through the back fence. What happened next is still redacted. All we know is that Morse left blood behind. His own. Not much, but enough. And it was the beginning of the unraveling. With that DNA sample, federal agents began backtracing every incident linked to Morse. Every metadata disappearance, every anonymized rental, every block of IP noise that had once looked like coincidence. It took 2 years, but they found him, in Maine, living under the identity of a deceased toddler who died in 1982, working as a night janitor for a biotech office. The perfect cover, no fingerprints on file, no social, no bank, just observation. That's all he did. Watch, wait, and select. When they arrested him, he didn't resist. He said only one thing: "You can't prove what doesn't exist." And he was almost right. Only 3 of the 26 victims were ever recovered. The rest are presumed dead, or worse, completely deleted in a way that no trace will ever surface. In court, he represented himself, calmly explaining that the world had become too crowded with ghosts of ourselves. He said people didn't deserve their data. They didn't deserve to be remembered if they couldn't even control how they appeared. He claimed he was doing them a favor, granting their final request to vanish. He's now in Supermax, under total lockdown, denied all access to electronics. But guards report strange behavior. Morse doesn't talk, doesn't move much. But once a week, they find folded notes in his cell, always blank except for 3 dots in Morse code. The symbol for S, or, as agents fear, the start of SOS, because maybe he was trying to disappear. Or maybe he was warning us. Long after the trial ended and Morse was locked away in a cement box beneath Florence ADX, the silence he left behind still made noise. Not the kind you hear, but the kind you feel when you open a contact list and wonder who's missing. When a number you swear you used to call just doesn't exist. That was Morse's lasting violence. He didn't stab, shoot, or suffocate. He made people unrecoverable. And even in prison, he remained dangerously close to nowhere. His file is paper only. His cell is stripped of all metal. No cameras, no plugs, no vents bigger than a finger. Because the FBI learned the hard way that Morse could communicate through systems most people don't even realize they're in. In one chilling post-arrest revelation, cybersecurity teams discovered that during his employment at the biotech facility in Maine, Morse had embedded tiny fragments of code into routine building temperature logs. The logs, just hourly numbers of HVAC flow and cooling output, had been exported every week. But when plotted over time, they spelled out phrases in binary, short sentences, messages like, "This one wanted to be seen. I am the black space between your backups. Check the lake, or don't. I already wiped her." Each message matched the week someone vanished, and none of it was ever caught in real time, because no one thought to check temperature files for murder notes. That's how deep his erasure went, through vents and scripts, cloud shadows and API echoes. He used the tools built to remember us, to forget us. Forensic analysts later recovered 76 shell companies Morse had created over a decade. All false, all layered, each one owning a PO box, a storage unit, or a van. In each van, blank phones, incinerated SI-MIS laptops that booted only into RAM. Even his burner accounts had burner accounts. When the feds finally breached his last known laptop, a device found inside a lead-lined safe buried beneath 3 feet of concrete in a Vermont cabin, it self-destructed. Not exploded, not sparked, just ceased. The hard drive despun, the circuit severed by a chemical reaction wired into its own motherboard. The screen flashed one last line, "You got here too late." The deeper truth, Morse was ahead of us. His understanding of identity went beyond names and faces. He mapped our presence in systems, the way your email autofills, how Google Earth caches shadows of your house, how facial recognition predicts your angle even if you're not in the frame. He didn't just delete victims, he edited the systems around them to adapt as if they were never there. In one case, he altered Street View data to show a building as abandoned when it was very much still occupied. Why? Because one of his victims lived there. Lived, past tense. Psychologists tried to understand the core of his pathology. Some called it narcissistic omnipotence, a god complex driven by control over reality. Others saw it as something worse, a form of digital nihilism, a belief that people were only real as long as data confirmed them. And if you could remove the data, then the person was never real. Morse believed identity was a shared illusion, that memory didn't matter if records disagreed, that erasure was not cruelty, but clarity, the clean slate made permanent. In one prison interview, conducted analog with pen and paper, he wrote only this: "When the screen goes black, who says you were ever in the room?" It's a philosophy that haunts digital crime divisions to this day. Because while Morse is locked away, his method isn't. His techniques have appeared in hacker forums. His alias, Morse, is now tagged to dozens of conspiracy threads. And worse, copycats have emerged. 2 disappearances in Arizona matched his protocol almost exactly, another in Michigan. In each case, the victim was tech-savvy, paranoid, trying to disappear on their own terms. But somehow, Morse, or someone channeling him, found them first. The terror he left behind wasn't just that he killed. It was that we couldn't prove it. No blood, no trace, no certainty. One mother, whose son vanished in 2016 after hiring Morse to clean his online footprint, still posts on forums every week. But no one replies. Not because they don't care, but because no one remembers her son's name. The systems erased him, as if he never texted, never bought groceries, never laughed. And Morse's chilling prophecy echoed truer each year. Proof is the only real pulse, and I stopped their hearts. Today, federal agencies maintain a silent list, 41 names total, flagged as Morse echoes. People who may be gone but can't be confirmed missing. Families who report them but get told they were never in the system. people who existed and then didn't. And somewhere, even now, a blank notepad in a cement cell waits for another dot, another whisper in binary, another act of unmaking, because killers like Morse don't leave ghosts. They delete the code. Some killers crave recognition, some crave silence, but the worst ones, they don't care if you remember them, only that you can't stop feeling them. Because pain is louder than memory, and once you've touched it, you carry it forever. The last man wiped people from the world like keystrokes, but this next one, he carved people into it, left them screaming inside of it. Not for fame, not for money, but for fun. Because sometimes, evil isn't religious, or strategic, or even broken. Sometimes it's just a boy who never learned how to stop playing, and grew up into something monstrous. In a swamp town outside Tallahassee, Florida, they still talk about the one who smiled too wide, the one who asked people to play games, the one they called the Puppet Boy. But his real name was Wyatt Graham, and what he did to people didn't just scar them, it rewired them. Wyatt didn't start with murder, he started with dummies, mannequins made of trash bags, duct tape, chicken bones. At 15, he was caught burying one behind the abandoned church near his trailer park, fully dressed, face painted, arms stitched into a praying pose. When asked why, he said, "Because someone has to live in it." He was hospitalized, released, forgotten. By 19, he was working night shifts at a discount arcade repair shop. Quiet, polite, socially hollow, and no one noticed when he stopped coming in. No one noticed that months before, he'd bought 600 feet of piano wire. It wasn't until 2021 that the first real body was found. A jogger tripped over a string in the woods near Appalachie Parkway. The wire snapped, and a figure slumped forward from a tree hollow. It looked like a scarecrow until the smell hit. Human, male, dead for weeks, but stitched together with parts from 3 different men, arms from one, face from another, spine braced with metal rods, posed like a marionette mid-step. A note was stapled to the chest. "Can you guess how many I used?" That's when the legend began. That's when people in Florida realized they hadn't been seeing trash in the woods. They'd been seeing warnings, bodies dressed like mannequins, heads carved with toy eyes, hands replaced with doll parts. But the terrifying twist was this: some of them were still alive. Wyatt didn't just kill, he restructured. Victims found alive had been surgically mutilated, nerve endings rerouted, jaws wired into fixed grins, eyelids snipped off. He would sedate them, operate for hours, then stitch them upright into woodland displays, left to rot or wake. One woman was found after 4 days tied to a modified rocking horse, her legs shattered into the curve of the frame. Another was discovered fused to a dollhouse, arms nailed through the windows, her face painted to match the wallpaper. Every scene was staged, every setup was a tableau. Wyatt wanted people to look, and when local news started reporting on the swamp puppeteer, Wyatt escalated. In a recorded 911 call, a man named Keith Mathers can be heard whispering, "He's behind me. He says I'm too stiff. He's going to loosen my spine." When police arrived, they found only a pile of wires and a tape. In it, Wyatt films the entire capture, not the violence, just the instruction. He calmly guides Keith through positions. "Lift your chin, smile wider. There you go. Now you're somebody else." The tape ends with the camera zooming into Keith's frozen eyes, a mirror placed behind him to reflect the twisted body he's been turned into. He wasn't dead when they found him, but he never spoke again. By the time the FBI got involved, there were 14 known victims, 7 dead, 4 alive but unresponsive, 3 missing. Every crime scene was marked with a phrase carved in wood, burned into trees, or stitched onto clothing. "Everyone's a puppet until they learn to dance." Wyatt's background revealed little. No father. Mother was a shut-in who hoarded toys. He was homeschooled until 11, then bounced between truancy cases. His childhood drawings showed dismembered cartoon people tied together with strings. In therapy, he once told a counselor, "I don't want to be alone, so I make them stay. I give them jobs. I give them stories." The notes in his hideouts supported that. He gave each victim a name, a backstory, a role in his twisted theater. One was the hero. One was the scared baby. One was simply called Laugh Track. Wyatt's capture was a fluke. A wildlife drone mapping wetlands picked up heat signatures near an abandoned rail line. Agents raided the cabin. A rotted train car turned into a butcher's stage. Inside, 3 victims were mounted in a rotating platform built from a carousel base. One was still alive, kept conscious by an IV drip and strapped to a speaker playing Wyatt's voice. "Smile. Don't stop. You're on stage." Wyatt wasn't there, but his mask was. A papier-mâché puppet face, blank, grinning, and a note inside the mouth, "I'll find better wood." They found him 3 days later hiding in an air duct in a motel outside Panama City, naked, smeared in glue, whispering to himself. His last words before sedation, "They moved wrong. I need stronger joints." He's in a psychiatric wing now, under sedation 23 hours a day. But nurses say at night they hear creaking, like joints being pulled, like strings going taut. And once, a mannequin arm appeared in his cell. No one knows how. The question isn't how many he hurt. The question is whether he's done. Or if somewhere out there, another boy, another mind shaped by string and silence, is learning how to make people dance. Trauma usually leaves space for healing. A rupture, however violent, can be soothed with time, support, and understanding. But what Wyatt Graham left behind in those woods wasn't trauma. It was programming. His victims weren't just harmed, they were rewired. Even those who survived the swamp installations, stitched, bolted, wired into grotesque poses, did not return as themselves. One woman, rescued from a display rigged inside a rusted Ferris wheel carriage, hasn't spoken a word in over 3 years, but she smiles, constantly. Her family says she doesn't respond to her name anymore, only to the phrase, "It's your cue." Another survivor, an Army vet named Elias Rourke, escaped before Wyatt could complete the mounting. His spine had already been partially reinforced with metal rods when he was found crawling barefoot toward the highway. He suffered no brain injury, no damage to speech centers. But to this day, he walks with his arms stiffly raised, elbows at 90 degrees, as if awaiting strings to be pulled from above. Wyatt's tools weren't traditional. He used fishing line, violin screws, child-safe epoxy, bits of wood from school bleachers. His craft was amateur, but his results were precise. Investigators believe he studied orthopedic surgery from stolen medical books and YouTube tutorials, not to heal, but to learn how to bend the body's limits. One of his notebooks, found in a shoebox beneath a staged family dinner scene, featured hand-sketched diagrams of victim skeletons with annotations like, "Joint too honest, reduce range of doubt, make the shoulder smile when the mouth forgets, replace emotion with rhythm." Each body he staged had a purpose, a role in what he called the last show. The FBI behavioral unit determined that Wyatt wasn't simply acting out psychosis, he was building a cast. A lifelong theater production starring people too broken to escape their parts. And the performances weren't just visual. Audio engineers combing through his swamp hideout discovered cassette tapes, not of music, but of dialogue. Hundreds of lines, all recorded in Wyatt's voice, mimicking different characters. A mother, a friend, a hero, a villain. It became clear that he played these tapes on loops while his victims were immobilized, forcing them to listen to fake memories on repeat. He was trying to overwrite their identities. In one tape, he sobs gently and says, "You're not alone. We're all part of this. You're so good when you listen. Why would you ever want to leave? The victims weren't just meant to pose, they were meant to belong to him, inside a world only he understood. What disturbed profilers most, however, was that Wyatt never expressed rage. His crimes weren't born from hatred or revenge. In every psychological interview, he came across as eerily serene, like a boy describing his favorite toy. When asked why he did it, he responded, "They were always falling apart. I just wanted to keep them from crumbling." It wasn't a lie, it was his truth. In his mind, pain was necessary to create permanence. Movement led to entropy. Only structure, only stillness could preserve a soul. That's why he called them puppets, not prisoners. They weren't broken to him. They were beautifully held. But the impact Wyatt left on the community around him shattered far beyond the crime scenes. For months after his arrest, missing persons reports surged across northern Florida. People saw mannequin shapes in every foggy field. Campers abandoned trails after spotting what they thought were limbs dangling in trees. Churches held prayer vigils, not just for the victims, but for the fear that had infected the woods. Trauma therapists in the region documented a spike in a newly classified disorder, marionette anxiety syndrome, a psychogenic condition where victims feel they're being moved by unseen strings, especially at night. Even more haunting were the copycat displays. In the year following Wyatt's imprisonment, over a dozen scenes were discovered mimicking his staging. Some were hoaxes, others were more sinister. In one case, a young boy disappeared during a field trip, later found suspended from a swing set, posed in a replica of Wyatt's infamous birthday boy scene. No suspect was ever caught. And while Wyatt remained locked down under 24-hour surveillance, new tableaus kept emerging, as if someone out there believed in the message. Everyone's a puppet, they just need the right hands. Wyatt himself refuses to discuss these imitations. He has withdrawn entirely from communication, staring at corners of his padded cell, twitching fingers in the air like he's pulling strings only he can see. On one occasion, guards found him sitting in a perfectly frozen pose, arms up, chin tilted, smile stretched unnaturally, mimicking his own victims. They feared he'd died, but when touched, he blinked, whispered, "Your turn next." The prison has since banned mirrors, mannequin images, even string and shoelaces from his unit. But the damage was done. He showed the world something it wasn't prepared for. That identity, dignity, and motion can all be controlled, not by force, but by intention. That the body is fragile, that the soul, if it exists, might be pliable. In the darkest corners of the internet, Wyatt Graham has become a myth, a symbol for fringe creators who believe life is chaos and pain is the only conductor of order. His drawings circulate like icons. His poses are mimicked in underground human art exhibits. And some even claim that the swamp still holds secrets. That other victims, real or invented, still swing in the trees, waiting to be found. Smiling, frozen, tethered to an idea that refuses to die. Because Wyatt's strings weren't made of thread. They were made of fear. The puppet boy left behind silence, but not peace. His victims breathed, yet barely lived. His displays were cleaned up, but never truly erased. It would have been a fitting end to a story soaked in strings and psychological scars. But evil, in its rawest form, never ends on a whisper. It escalates, it mutates, it waits. And in the vast, broken backroads of America, it sometimes crawls out of nowhere, faceless, reasonless, pure. If Wyatt Graham rewired pain into art, then our final killer did the opposite. He turned art into obliteration. He didn't manipulate bodies. He erased them, with tools so crude, so primal, it was as if he were trying to drag humanity back into a time before language, before identity, before mercy. The man the media called the Skinner of Route 23 had no manifesto, no motive, and no pattern, until someone noticed that every victim had drawn something before they died. It began in Appalachia. 2017. A young woman named Molly Yates was found in an abandoned tobacco barn off Route 23 near Johnson County, Kentucky. Her body was discovered slumped against a rusted barrel, arms stretched forward, skin flayed clean from her back with surgical precision. What caught attention wasn't just the brutality, it was what was left behind. Carved into the wooden barn wall in red marker was a detailed drawing, a childlike sketch of a man with no eyes, holding a needle. Above it, 3 words scrawled like a title, "He tells me how." At first, investigators thought it was a hallucination, a paranoid delusion left by a woman in agony. But then another victim turned up. Same region, same posture, same precise flaying. And this time, the drawing was on an old gas station window, drawn in condensation and blood. A man with no eyes, a needle in his hand. Beneath it, "He helped me see." That's when they realized the victims weren't being killed, they were being converted. For 2 years, the bodies kept appearing, sometimes weeks apart, sometimes only hours, always near Route 23, which stretches through Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia. Always posed, always mutilated with sickening care, and always accompanied by a drawing, a different sketch, but the same figure. Law enforcement struggled to find links between victims. They weren't all women. They weren't all locals. They had no shared history, religion, or job. But eventually, a profiler noticed something chilling. Each victim had, within the year before death, posted artwork online. Amateur drawings, doodles, graphic design. Some had Etsy shops, others posted fan art, tattoo sketches, or journaling pages. The drawings weren't disturbing, but they all had one thing in common: they were unfinished. In captions, many of them wrote things like, "Not sure where to go with this," or "I hate how it ends," or "Something about this feels wrong." It was as if every one of them had created an image they couldn't complete. That's when the term "the critic" surfaced on dark forums, a whisper about a man who finishes what others shouldn't start. In the underbelly of the internet, users began reporting odd interactions. An anonymous commenter would message them, praising their work, then offering suggestions. The messages were cold, clinical. They didn't offer help. They offered control. Phrases like, "The problem is, you think it belongs to you. Let me take your hand and fix it. I'll show you how skin should breathe." Victims who responded, even politely, would go missing within weeks. The FBI created a database of flagged users based on these interactions. But the killer stayed ahead. He didn't leave DNA. He didn't drive. Witnesses never saw him arrive, only that strange things started happening around certain towns. Animals would vanish, locks would be picked, and then the scratching would begin. Survivors, yes, there were 2, described hearing faint scratching sounds in their walls before the attacks. At first, they thought it was rats. Then the noises grew louder, more deliberate. One woman, a college student in Wise, Virginia, heard tapping from inside her closet for 3 nights before she finally opened it. Inside, she found her own sketchbook, missing for months, torn apart, reassembled, and pinned into the wall in the shape of a human rib cage. That night, she fled. The man never caught her, but he left behind a single red crayon in the shape of a thumb. The second survivor, a male man, was found stumbling into a gas station at 2 a.m. covered in blood, whispering, "He tried to draw me." He had wounds on his back, half-peeled skin across his shoulders, and what appeared to be finger-painted lines across his spine. He'd never posted art, but his daughter had. Dozens of little cartoon sketches online. She was found dead 3 days later, folded into a child's desk, her body emptied like a paper sleeve. Above her, in a child's handwriting, "This one's mine now." The Skinner didn't want praise. He didn't want performance. He wanted correction. He saw incomplete art as an insult, a flaw, a weakness in the human will that he was compelled to resolve with knife, wire, and flesh. His victims weren't chosen by gender or age, but by the moment they admitted doubt in their own work. To this day, he hasn't been caught. No fingerprints, no trail. Some say he sleeps in barns, moves through sewage drains, rides beneath semi-trucks like a parasite. Others think he's a collective, a cult. But every year, without fail, another drawing appears, on brick, on bark, on skin, of a man with no eyes, and a message scrawled beside it. He tells me how. They say true evil doesn't end, it lingers. It bleeds into the background noise, hides between headlines, and waits for you to stop paying attention. That's what makes the Skinner of Route 23 more than a killer. He's a living question mark, a legend too grounded to dismiss, too slippery to prove. And unlike the others, the egotists, the manipulators, the broken artists who turned suffering into spectacle, this man never asked for a spotlight. He left no monologue, no phone call, no confession, just lines, lines on wood, on mirrors, on bone. And with every new body they find, investigators are forced to reckon with a truth darker than most crimes allow, that he doesn't kill for power or pleasure or even chaos. He kills for structure. He believes in finishing things. And to him, human beings are just unfinished sketches. After the first 7 cases were linked to him officially, the FBI launched Operation Red Wax, a multi-jurisdictional task force focused solely on catching the Skinner. It didn't take long for the case to swell beyond belief. Over the next 2 years, 36 additional cases surfaced bearing what analysts dubbed the signature of red line, a crude drawing in red medium, crayon, chalk, lipstick, blood, of the same eyeless man with a needle, often accompanied by cryptic phrases such as, "This isn't yours." He draws in deeper colors, and the most chilling, "You called him by drawing first." That line appeared beside the body of a 14-year-old boy from Virginia who had posted comic sketches online only a week prior. What terrified agents most wasn't just the escalation, it was the geographic spread. The Skinner's range no longer hovered near Route 23. Cases with nearly identical signatures started appearing in Alabama, West Virginia, even as far north as Ohio. The profile shattered all rules. Serial killers typically stick to comfort zones, their hometown, their workplace radius, their routine pathways. But this one, he adapted like a shadow. He followed art. Wherever vulnerable, unfinished artwork appeared online, he wasn't far behind. One of the few forensic leads came from a case in Pike County, Kentucky. A barn fire led investigators to a crawl space beneath a burned-out feed store, where they found a leather-bound sketchbook half-melted by flame. Inside were dozens of copies of his signature figure, each drawn over the face of a real missing person. Every victim's art had been cut out and pasted into the book, crude collages of humanity erased. What stunned analysts most wasn't the content, but the material. The pages were made of human skin, tannered, pressed, folded into pages like parchment. DNA testing later confirmed 4 of the victims had been used to create it, and they only had half the book. That was when it became clear. This man wasn't just finishing others' art. He was trying to rewrite the medium itself. He believed in something, not religion, not philosophy, something older. One profiler speculated he saw the body as the ultimate flawed canvas, too temporary, too proud, too noisy, and his edits were a kind of sacred silence, like redacting a messy paragraph, like erasing mistakes. And when the FBI finally thought they had their man, a drifter caught outside Ashland with sketches matching 4 crime scenes, the case collapsed. The man was real. His obsession was real. But his connection, fabricated. He was a copycat. Someone who found the legend so compelling, he started mimicking it in hopes of becoming it. He confessed to 3 staged scenes. One included a mannequin filled with pig blood and posed like a skinned corpse. He was sentenced, but investigators knew they hadn't caught the real Skinner. The murders didn't stop. They changed. They evolved. In 2023, a woman named Hannah Kelmer was found alive after being abducted from a rest stop off E81 in Virginia. She had no memory of the man's face, but described his voice as flat, polite, and hollow, like an audiobook played through water. She wasn't assaulted in the traditional sense. She wasn't tortured. She was made to draw. For 3 days, he gave her chalk, charcoal, and canvas, forcing her to redo the same figure again and again. The eyeless man, the needle, the phrase, "He tells me how." When she finally collapsed from dehydration, he carried her outside, whispered, "You finished it," then vanished. Psychiatrists say Hannah hasn't drawn since. Her hands shake uncontrollably at the sight of color. She sees patterns in her sleep, lines that move, eyes that don't exist. She's still convinced the man is watching her, not from the world, but from what she drew. The FBI now keeps a confidential watch list of online artists who've reported strange messages or lost followers to anonymous deletions. Forums have popped up to warn young creators not to leave unfinished work online. Some even believe that the critic isn't a man at all, but a belief, a demon, a self-fulfilling curse. But investigators remain rooted in fact. They know he's human. They've found hairs, fibers, partial prints. But every time they get close, the data vanishes, overwritten, corrupted, or scrubbed, as if someone knew the search queries before they were even typed. And yet, the red lines keep appearing. Last month, a drawing was found behind the toilet tank of a school in rural Kentucky, a child's doodle but stained with real blood. A smiling figure, a needle, no eyes. This time the phrase was different. "I watched Mommy finish it." And the worst part, no child at that school is missing. No parent is under suspicion. No teacher recalls anything unusual. But the janitor, the one who reported it, was found dead 2 weeks later in his apartment, face frozen in horror, no sign of forced entry. Just a single red line drawn across his mirror. They say evil ends when we name it. But the Skinner of Route 23 refuses to be named. He's not a man, not to his victims, not to the families, not to the ones who can't stop drawing. He's a correction, a critic, a blade held by silence. And every year, another set of unfinished lines gets crossed. And we wonder how long until it's ours. 5 names, 5 stories, 5 nightmares wrapped in skin, wire, metal, and memory. You've heard them now. The lifeguard who turned his lovers into trophies, the preacher who mapped his God with blood, the coder who made victims vanish into code, the boy who turned humans into puppets, and the artist who skinned the unfinished into silence. But if you're still trying to understand who they were, what they wanted, what made them do it, you've missed the point. These killers didn't rise out of nowhere. They rose out of us, out of gas station alleys, factory towns, crumbling highways, forgotten trailer parks, and abandoned church basements. They didn't belong to the night. They belonged to the map, to America itself. And if you look closely enough, you'll see it too. The quiet spaces between streetlights where monsters don't just lurk, they grow. Because that's the part we never want to talk about. We can handle evil when it has a cause, when it's jealousy, money, revenge, rage. That kind of evil makes sense. We can box it up, tape a motive to it, and send it to prison with a name. But what about the evil that doesn't want attention? The kind that wears your clothes, speaks your language, and smiles when you walk past it at Walmart. The kind that goes to work Monday, kills Wednesday, and plants roses Saturday without blinking. What about the ones who don't snap because they were always broken, just well-behaved until they didn't feel like pretending? That's what these 5 cases reveal, not just about the killers, but about the country that made them. Look at the map again. California, Florida, Kentucky, Texas. These are not war zones. These are not cities under siege. These are places with football fields, BBQ joints, church bingo nights, and patriotic parades. And still, A man can keep human skins under his floorboards. A boy can build marionettes from real bones. A father can turn his daughter's face into scripture. And for years, nobody notices. Why? Because we don't want to. America doesn't run on fear. It runs on ignoring fear, on calling it a phase, a rumor, a glitch, and that ignorance becomes soil. And in that soil, the darkest seeds bloom. Each of these 5 killers followed different patterns, used different tools, hunted different prey. But if you look deeper, you'll see the same fracture line running through all of them. They believed the world wasn't real until they rewrote it. For the lifeguard, love didn't exist unless he could own it. For the preacher, faith was just control wearing God's face. For the coder, truth was a lie waiting to be edited. For the puppet boy, silence was a canvas. And for the Skinner, life was just a messy draft that begged to be cut clean. And every one of them started small: a lost job, a father who vanished, a church that turned cold, a therapist who stopped listening, a drawing that no one understood. That's what's terrifying. It's not that they were born killers, it's that they were born invisible. And by the time someone looked close enough to see them, they'd already started looking back. The news always asks the same question: how could this happen here? But that's the wrong question. The right one is, why wouldn't it? When we let loneliness rot, it grows fangs. When we laugh off obsession, it grows claws. When we pretend silence is peace, we teach it to scream through action. America is not just a place of freedom. It's a place where freedom can curdle, where the right to disappear becomes the right to destroy. That's why true crime isn't just entertainment. It's a mirror. And sometimes when you stare long enough into the eyes of a killer, you see something horrifying staring back. A version of yourself. Not the whole you. Just the part you left ignored. The part that stopped trusting. The part that started hiding. The part that wondered, what if I mattered more when I hurt people than when I helped them? It's not an excuse, it's a warning. Because none of these 5 stories started with death. They started with neglect. And in a country as loud, fast, and disconnected as ours, neglect is as common as dust. So the next time someone seems off, not dangerous, just distant, don't wait for the news to explain what they became. Ask who they are now. Because all 5 of these killers were seen and ignored, and somewhere between being looked at and being understood, they made a choice. And that choice cost dozens of lives.